morning.
Morning, Babz. It's so good to see you. How are you?
It is lovely to see you, Jeff Grant. I feel like I haven't seen you in quite some time. I've been on medical leave and I'm back, so it's good to be back in the CGI big chair.
CJI.
What did I say?
CGI.
Oh, CJI.
Yeah.
All right, I meant criminal greatness insider.
Oh, that's all right. That's right. How you feeling, Babz? How you doing?
I'm fine. I love the way that people receive this show, Jeff. Everywhere I go, people talk about what they hear on this show and how their perspective of criminal justice has broadened because of this show. So I'm quite proud of that.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, because people always think criminal justice is about people going to jail, come out of jail, go back to jail. They don't think about all the moving parts and the universe of what makes up criminal justice.
So how is it possible that something that you and I planned together 4 years ago actually worked out? It's almost unbelievable, right?
No, it's not. Everything we touch is golden. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? But anyway, thank you to the Community Foundation for continuing to take this journey with us.
Yeah,
and to our listeners, and to our friends and family, Lynn Springer and Andrew Kaplan, who support us without question and without doubt. So, all right, we got the housekeeping out the way. Guess who's in studio with us? One of our favorite people. Glenn Martin.
Glenn E. Martin is with us. And actually, this episode is called Glenn E. Martin Tells All. So that's how we've been promoting it.
And people were asking me like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know.
We don't know either.
I mean, people have been texting me and like, well, what is happening? I was like, I don't know.
Well, let me just set the context, okay? Because two years ago already, Glenn came on our show and graced us with being the first interview that he gave after he had left Just Leadership USA. And
which is an organization that he founded.
So the fact that you trusted us with that is the grace and beauty of that, and the honor of that is not lost on us, Glenn. And people have been talking to us about it now for years. Frankly, we got a lot of mileage out of that interview. But now it's 2 years later, and you're doing unbelievably exciting stuff in the criminal justice field and in the real estate field and the training field. And so hopefully you'll talk to us all about it, but also kind of bring us up to date. And I know you reached out to me and contacted me and told me that there were some things that you wanted to talk about. And this is for you. You're our friend, our dear friend. So this is a free forum for you, man. So you can tell us where you want to go.
Yeah, cool. I am really glad to be back. These are the only interviews I do these days, to be quite honest. I turned down just about everything else. This feels like a really good space to me, a safe space. And I always appreciate the transparency and honesty and compassion with which we have these conversations. So I'm good to go. Everything's on the table except things that are protected by legal documents.
So Glenn, why don't we kind of just start with where we left off last time? Because it was, you had talked about a lot of the things that had happened to you when you left Just Leadership and some of the issues that were going on in your life then. And you were just starting off on the new Glenn Martin journey. So, and I know that in talking to you personally, that there were some disappointments in your life, some people who you probably expected to be there in your corner, but it didn't really work out that way. And then maybe other people who showed up that you didn't expect as well.
Yeah, you never know who's going to show up in the middle of a storm, and you never know who's going to desert you in the middle of a storm. And that was one of the biggest blows for me. I went through a tough time, a bunch of accusations, some stuff true, some stuff not. some stuff orchestrated. But what blew me away is like people I knew for a decade and more decided to really push me to the margins and isolate me. I mean, the first time I came on your show, I was totally suicidal, if I'm being honest. Like, it was just a really rough time. I mean, I kept the smile on because we needed to get through the show, but it was one of the toughest times in my life. I've never gotten that sort of in a dark place, if you will, but I definitely felt like I was at the bottom of a dark well looking up. But then there were other people who came through who I never would have imagined, to be honest. There were people who said to me, look, I'm gonna walk with you on this journey. And, in some ways now, when I look back, this all felt like a huge gift from God, because it's not often in life a person who's surrounded by tens of thousands of people who are cheering them on and holding them up as the poster child, if you will, gets a chance to really clear the sea and see who's left standing during the tough times. And so that was a really tough time, but you're right. I'm in a very different place now. Excited to talk a bit about that.
Okay. So where do you want to start? Because I do notice a very different Glenn today than the last time that you were here. I mean, I don't think you were very smiley. I think you were very guarded and you were very tense, but you seem much more relaxed and much more at ease.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think the word people use to describe me lately is free, which is really interesting because I walked out of prison 20 years ago after serving 6 years. And, people would take a look at me and say, like, damn, this guy is really at the height of his game, right? He's traveling all over the country, he's speaking publicly, he's at all the Ivy League institutions, he's running an agency with a multi-million-dollar budget, he's raised $80 million in 15 years. Like, there were so many reasons for people to point to me and say, he's at the top of his game. But people really didn't understand how I was sort of enslaved by the nonprofit industrial complex. Like, it was a really tough place to be, a difficult role to be in. I don't think I ever signed up to play hero. I think I did what I needed to do to get the work done. And I think I paid a huge price for it in the end. And so today, part of the way my life is structured is to give me particularly the economic independence to speak with my own voice, to not worry about getting phone calls from people telling me what I can and can't say, which was a huge part of my life while I was in the nonprofit space. And, I also get to invest in people that I choose these days. Like I offer a lot of pro bono support through my consulting work around helping nonprofits. I get to choose my clients. So I have a bunch of clients who pay me a crap load of money, and they essentially subsidize people who can't afford to pay me. And so I get to choose my pro bono and low bono clients. That's a great place to be, to get to choose which criminal justice reform organizations I work with, which leaders I work with, and so on, and to be able to share the wisdom of my failures. I mean, I really have sort of failed my way to success, and I'm sure that wasn't the last one. And then in real estate, I'm just kicking butt and taking names. It's just fascinating to me. I've always thought I wanted to get into real estate. And it's really strange because while I was in nonprofit, what you hear often is that poverty is some sort of badge of honor. And the truth of the matter is that even though I was hearing that over and over and really consuming it and believing it, a lot of the people I was surrounded by who were doing the work actually were doing financially well, to be quite honest. And so in some ways, the tragedy, the things falling apart in 2017 created space for me to let go of that and to really build some wealth.
Glenn, when you and I last had lunch, so it was pre-pandemic, when we had lunch in Harlem, one of the things that you talked to me about was that you're never going back to be a nonprofit leader, and that what you want to be is a power of example as a successful person, business person, and someone who can lift people up with the right kind of values. And the thing, what you pointed out at the time to me was that people don't know that that success is a good thing, that they can be successful, and that's a form of leadership. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, in some ways, I feel like I've lived my life many times over in these like 6, 7 year increments. I sort of get an itch around 5 years, and it takes me another year and a half to figure out what I'm doing next. And then I make this huge leap. So I feel like I've really benefited from that, still being relatively young, but having had multiple iterations of my life. And I feel like the one that I'm currently in, maybe it's not the last one, but it does feel like one example that I've wanted to share with particularly formerly incarcerated people, which is that you can lead from any space. I actually worry about the way the nonprofit industrial complex really channels formerly incarcerated people into that space and convinces them that this is what success looks like. That's one example of success. And we know that research tells us that people who've been harmed by the criminal justice system, people who've suffered under that system, want to give back, want to help others, want to reach back. So in some ways, it feels like a natural fit, but there's multiple ways to. I just wrote a check to a nonprofit for $10,000 last week. Like, I wasn't able to do that just a year and a half. In fact, when I came on your show, I was mired in debt as a result of what happened in 2017, $750,000. And so here I am today, entrepreneur. I own multiple pieces of real estate in Savannah, Georgia in particular. But even when you think of the people who rent from me, I have people who had hard times during the pandemic. These are poor people in Georgia, people who've been involved in the criminal justice system. And I, as an entrepreneur, someone who had the resources and could take the hit, was able to say, you know what, I'm not going to evict those people. You know what, let's stretch that rent over the next 3 or 4 months. You know what, let's forgive 1 month's rent. And so for me, that still feels like a contribution to social justice work from a different angle, but one that I would argue is just as viable as running a nonprofit.
So I'm feeling like I'm hearing a different kind of resurrection story here, right? Like I feel like this is a different conversation, because I am in agreement with you, and I have stayed away from the very thing that you're talking about. And it's very difficult because, you are pulled into it and people expect you to run toward that nonprofit. And I love that you called it industrial complex. And I have shied away from it. And I am very deliberate and picky and choosy about the things that I sort of support. Now, I have no wealth to speak of, but I understand what you're talking about in terms of the expectation of what you should be doing. And I'm quite interested in you talking about, when did the light bulb go off for you when you made that jump or that leap?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I convinced myself that the more people looked to me as like their heroes, the more I needed to play into that role. What I didn't realize when I was in the middle of it is, when your hero disappoints you, if you watch movies about heroes, they often get crushed at some point in the movie, right? Like, and so heroes get built up to get crushed. And so I essentially said to myself, like, why would I set myself up for that ever again? And it was a painful moment. I had philanthropy blacklisting me, telling me if I didn't stop emailing and phone calling people, they would blacklist me. I'd never raise money again. Don't come around here. I had one woman who works at the Ford Foundation essentially say to me, how do I know you didn't commit a felony in your office that you didn't tell me about? Like, all sorts of really disgusting things from people who describe themselves as social justice advocates. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be in a movement where the very people who stand next to me and say they care about justice, they care about restoration, they care about equity and those sorts of things, actually, the moment they feel personally aggrieved, they let go of those values and they engage in what I call horizontal violence. I've come to accept people for what they are, human beings, in all of their fallibility. Like me spending time in therapy for the last few years, talking to hundreds of people about my experience, my journey, getting input, getting feedback, getting opinions, have just come to realize that in some ways, if we can't, as a movement, model for the rest of the world what true justice looks like, good luck. Good luck hitting a tipping point. And so those are some of the things that have really driven me in this direction. I also don't want to put people in boxes anymore, even wealthy people. I meet wealthy people all that. My partner is a formerly incarcerated person. He's very wealthy, did time in federal prison, came out, in fact, learned more about real estate in there, built on top of what he knew before. And, I bought 19 homes in 30 months. I'm actually buying my 21st home today. But he and I are in deals now where in less than 30 more days, I'll have another 23 homes to speak of, $4 million line of credit and a refinance for $2 million. Like this guy to me is a leader, and he cares about social justice. All he talks about is how do we build a housing portfolio that is socially just and that creates space to build up the leadership of other people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. I feel good.
I think I told you this, Glenn, when you were on my other podcast, White Collar Week, not that long ago. But I was watching this movie, The Banker.
Yeah, I watched it afterwards.
Right afterwards. And I'm watching the movie, and all I wanted to do is hit you up while I'm watching it. I'm going, this is like the Glenn Martin story. Well, it didn't wind up so well for them. So that's not the part I meant. But actually going into neighborhoods where you can serve people and where they need your attention, they need your focus. And so when you told me that you were going into Savannah, and I've seen your portfolio online, this reminds me, frankly, of my family and the early New York real estate people in the boroughs, not in Manhattan, but in the boroughs. And because that's who my family was involved with. And that's how I got into real estate and real estate law back then. And it was really filling a need. And look, they got wealthy because of it, but they understood a critical need that had to happen. And so that's how Lefrak built Lefrak City, and Starrett built Starrett City, and things like that. But it started off with these single family houses. It started off with leveraging things into multiple purchases.
The first time I went to Savannah, the first thing you pick up on is that this place is obviously unique, unlike any other city in the country, full of history, preserved history, and that Black folks built the city. Like, clearly this is a city where slaves built, right? Yet the thing that stood out to me is that the most beautiful part of the city, downtown, in terms of resources and greenery and everything else, Black folks didn't live there. I was just blown away by it. I was like, where are the Black professionals in downtown Savannah? And that was part of my motivation for buying my first unit there, right downtown, across the street from one of the most beautiful parks in the city. And so I bought that home, and I said, wait a minute, all the research you did to buy this place as an investment, you should just use that and keep moving. And then I went outside of the city. I went on the other side of Martin Luther King Boulevard, right? And I was like, oh,
I know exactly where you are.
Yeah, I'm on the west side now. I'm like, this is the hood. I mean, I started looking at homes with like bullet holes in the bathroom door. And so I would choose a home on the block that made sense as an investor, and I'd fix it up to be the best home on the block. And you would be surprised how quickly everyone else is trying to match the beauty of that property. And I just want to keep going. Like, I just see such opportunity here. And, when I buy homes, I'm buying 15 units in Montgomery, Alabama in the next couple of weeks. And the guy is selling it to me. And I send a bunch of inspectors over to take a look at it. And as my folks are doing the inspections, the people who live there are whispering to my inspectors that, they have a roof leak that's been going on for 3 years, and they have a broken hot water heater and all this other crap, all this slumlord garbage. I mean, I grew up on Section 8. I grew up poor. I know what it's like to have a slumlord. And I go back to the seller and I play hardball. I'm an advocate. I'm using my advocacy skills in real estate. And I go back and I'm like, look, I'll shut this whole deal down today. In fact, you really don't want the press to know that you just told your tenants to tell me that there's nothing wrong, like that you offered to pay them, not to tell me what was wrong with their homes. So renegotiated, got the guy to write off about $300,000 on the price. And I'm going to use every bit of that $300,000 to rehab all of these homes, all of them, and try to keep every single tenant that's in those spaces. Like, that is part of my commitment. I can still make money and do well, and do well by people.
Glenn,
So
I have to tell you, this is how I grew up. You sound like my great uncle. It's great. It's great. He had a Jewish accent, but you sound like my great uncle. You know, if you check out the housing prices right now in Compton, in LA, those houses, you know, the houses that you saw in those you know, those early movies. What were the movies? The Compton movies.
like Boys in the
Menace to
Hood.
Society and Boys in the
exactly.
Hood.
Boys in the Hood. Those houses are going for $600,000-700,000 now. It's crazy, and you've lived through the gentrification of Harlem. So yeah, so you kind of know. So where are you with keeping things in a place where folks that need affordable housing can live there, or are you kind of like right on the edge of starting gentrification in these neighborhoods?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. These homes are on the low end. I don't think these homes will ever be gentrified to the point where, you know, people of color being pushed out. Having said that, I analyze every property before I make an offer, right? I do my cash on cash analysis. Because it's a secondary market like Savannah, I really have a lot of room to play around. So I look for places that are giving me back 22%, 25%, 27%. Gives me a ton of room to take a hit, right? Like I can try to squeeze every penny out of it and get 25%, or I can do the right thing, rent at the same rents that I would rent even if the place were in a crappy position. And I just don't do it. Like I mean, I've had contractors come in and say to me, should I change those cabinets? And I say, well, let me ask you a question. Would you eat anything out of those cabinets? No. Then why are you asking me that question? You know, like I had a real estate broker once who kept telling me things like, you don't need to add new appliances. You don't need to change the floor. These people will rent to you regardless. And I'm like, you don't realize who you're working for. Like I've had to get rid of so many people because they were actually literally trying to convince me to be a slumlord. And it's just not how I'm built. And you know, as I said, I grew up dirt poor. 3 brothers, single mother, Black, middle of Bed-Stuy, not the gentrified Bed-Stuy, the do or die Bed-Stuy. And, you know, I can't turn around and do that to other people.
It's interesting. Savannah is built on the 9 squares as New Haven, one of the only 2 cities in the country built on this 9 square concept, which is, I guess, the beginnings of a planned community. So I have a real affinity for Savannah and the beauty of Savannah, because it's very much like New Haven, very much like New Haven. So
I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yes, so you might want to take a jaunt through New Haven and.
Oh, that's good, because I need you know what, I need a slightly different way to look at Savannah, because when I look at those beautiful little parks that they have all over, 22 of them, you know, I think of strange fruit. You know, I think of what was happening in these parks years ago. Like, you know, it's a very scary place also for a Black man to be quite honest. Like when I'm downtown Savannah, you know, it's a pretty progressive place for the South. But when I get in my car and I drive to go see properties or go meet people a few miles away from this city, I am not trying to get pulled over. Like you know, the South is a scary place for people of color. But for me, it was great because, you know, I grew up in the Caribbean at first, but then I've spent my life in progressive New York, although I understand what that really means these days. But being in the South gives me balance in terms of when I think about policy change, when I think about the stuff that I really care about, the fire in my belly, like I better understand what sort of messaging and what people in the South are thinking about and where they come from. And I think it actually makes me a more effective advocate. Someone just asked me the other day, are you going to get back into social justice work? I'm like, every day of my life, every minute of my life, I'm doing social justice work. And I just don't have to lead from the front of the room.
I was going to ask you, do you think about just leadership? Are you proud of the work that what you created and how enduring and how so many people have come through and it has changed and elevated lives? I mean, do you have a fondness for it? I mean, how do you think about it now? Or are you able to think about it as a part of your life that you're proud of? Or is it still just a little too bitter, sweet?
Or is this the tells all part of the promo?
Yeah, well, I think you should have sent me that memo, because this is the part where there's probably 8 lawyers listening saying, what's he going to say next? So here's how I'm going to answer. I was on a phone call yesterday with a group of people who have convictions that put them in the deepest end of the pool, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'm a person who likes to work in the deep end of the pool. I'm like, if you get it, if you change policy for people who are despised the most, then everything else becomes low-hanging fruit. That was the model behind close Rikers, right? Like, if you go for the whole damn thing, no matter where you land, you're going to be in a better place than where you started. Yeah. And I'm on the phone talking to these folks about something new and exciting that they're building. I don't want to steal their thunder, so I won't go into detail. Mm-hmm. But I realized that I think about 5 out of 8 or 9 people on the call had gone through Just Leadership's training and had been exposed to David Mensa and the principles of responsibility and self-reflection and creating collective leadership. And each of them spoke about it as they introduced themselves. And it was a proud moment for me. It was a proud moment because, you know, if you kill one leader and the movement dies, then you don't have a movement. Yeah. You know, and if you build an institution and you walk away and it falls apart, then you haven't really built an institution. Mm-hmm. And trust me, I've built many things before I built Just Leadership, and some of them don't exist, or they exist in some skeletal version of what I built. And those were lessons for me, that I actually built it too much around me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, yes, I do take some ownership and some pride over what we were able to do as a collective. You know, it wasn't just me at Just Leadership. And the fact that those seeds are now growing into trees that provide shade in ways that we could have never imagined when we put this idea into motion.
See, the unique proposition for me, for Just Leadership, and because I was part of, I don't know, probably a dozen grassroots organizations, criminal justice organizations, every one of which failed. And I was a young buck coming into the criminal justice space. So people asked me to get involved. And what I saw in Just Leadership at the time was the first legitimate top-down, well-financed organization. It was not a grassroots organization. And so this is a lesson I tell people all the time, because, you know, you put 3 people in a room who've been to prison, but their agendas don't align. You know, one wants to talk about this and one wants to talk about that, and they never make it to the 3rd meeting. So how is it that you go from being a guy in prison to someone who is actually going to be top down, the head of an organization, and convincing people with tens of $millions to fund you, because basically you're the face, you're the one who they're going to trust. And then you're, in essence, taking that same top down, and now you're transferring it to something else where people are trusting you with a lot of money. So how does that happen?
Yeah, I think I take umbrage to you calling me a guy who was once in prison. I want to be a guy who was once in prison who had stuck up about 100 jewelry stores. That is important to the rest of my answer. Because first of all, my whole life has been about running from poverty. And at first I found some scrappy ways to do it, got in trouble, just kept going till I got the jewelry stores. Got me in trouble, but made a lot of money. And it took a lot of strategy, a lot of thinking, a lot of intellect. And, you know, people ask me all the time, like, when did you turn your life around? I don't know. I mean, same sort of skills I was using in the street, just sort of refocused, you know? I mean,
I need a watch, Glenn, by the way. I'm just telling you.
I mean, this is what they mean when they say, I'm using my powers.
I have to tell you a fast story. I was representing in the latter days of when I was still general counsel to firms, you know, I was in trouble. So I'm taking like lower and lower and lower. The bar is lowering as to who I'll accept as a client. Got it. And so I'm representing some affiliates, right? I don't think you could use the word mob, But regardless, I'm representing some of the affiliates, and it's my ex-wife's birthday. So I go to him and I say to him, you know, my wife wants a watch for her birthday. And he says to me, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And I said, no. I said, she wants a particular watch. And he looks at me and he says to me, we don't do particular.
Whatever's on the back of the truck. Whatever. Boy, you're bringing me back. You're bringing me back. I used to literally drive up to car dealerships, guys dressed in suits, talking the talk and everything, pull up a truck full of electronics and be like, I want that brand new Lexus. You take that truck full of electronics. And everyone would be on their happy way. Okay, let me fully answer your question. So, you know, I have been exposed to exceptional opportunities. Let me say that. There's actually people who I dislike right now, who I think of as enemies, who I don't want to be anywhere around, who I'd be the first person to say, I wouldn't have been able to build just leadership if they didn't teach me some of the things they taught me. And so I learned a lot about management, a lot about fundraising, just sort of biding my time. You know, I mean, there were years where I was like, I'm going to build an organization. And some people would be like, you're not ready for that. And that was painful to hear, but they were right. And so me working at other nonprofits, learning from other leaders, having mentors, you know, just emulating what I see others doing, is a big part of what got me to the point where I was able to build just leadership. But look, there's some regrets there also. I mean, I want to go back to this thing about playing hero. Like, we're in a space where on any given day, we choose the 8 or 10 people who we see as like the heroes of the movement. And if I had to do this all over again, I would never have stepped into that role. That was the most awful thing I had ever done. It played right into white supremacy, right into the philanthropic industrial complex. Like, it came back to hit me like a ton of bricks. Easily, the whole Me Too stuff after 2017 was worse than the 6 years I'd been in prison. I would do the 6 years over to undo the last 3 years, definitely the first 2 years after that. It was awful. I mean, when I went to prison, it wasn't on the front page of the New York Times, first of all. Second of all, my friends didn't really abandon me like the way it happened in 2017. People, you know, walked with me. It was a smaller number of people, but still, people walked with me. And, you know, I take some ownership over it. I take ownership over the behavior that got me there, the openness I gave to people who hated me to really cause that moment. But at the same time, like, it was a kick in the butt. It was a kick in the butt. And now I get it. Now I wouldn't undo it for the world, actually. Like, the truth is, the lessons that have come out of it for me, and me being able to take those gifts and share it with others, is really important. But I say all that just to say, like, I played this charismatic, handsome, well-spoken, light-skinned Black guy, straight nose, easy to talk to, easy to invite to Harvard, to Yale, to these places where, you know, you're looking for a Black man to check a box and say, look, you know, Black guy came out, he told us about oppression. We checked that box, let's move. I wouldn't do that all over again. Like, I'd be the maniac I am now. If you look at my Twitter account, that's the real me. That's who I am. Like, that's who I want to be. In fact, the last time I wore a suit was on this goddamn show. I can say goddamn, right? On this show a few years ago. Like, I literally, like, I am not wearing a suit anymore. I am not playing the game anymore. I'm done with it. Accept me as I am, or keep it moving.
Wow. So how does that feel?
Yeah, that's right. How's it feel?
You know, I say to people, in 2017, people didn't want to hire me. Today, you can't afford me. That feels really good. That feels really good. I say to people, in 2017, I wanted to jump off a roof, and now I have 22 to choose from. It feels good. It feels good, not just to have the wealth and to have the resources, but to be able to wake up in the morning and do what I want to do. I still work hard. I work out 6 a.m. on my rooftop with a trainer. I then start my day. My day goes from 8 a.m. to about 9 p.m. So I still grind. I still work hard. I find time during the day to invest in other people. That's something people can't take away from me. It's something some people hate, the fact that I take all these gifts and all these things that have been mystified in the criminal justice space and the nonprofit space and the philanthropy space, and I give it away. I charge some people for it, but other people, I give it away. That bothers people. That bothers people that I tell people where the money lives. and how to go after it and how to package themselves to get it. Because people, I mean, let's be honest, there's a small handful of people that have this proximity to philanthropy that makes them powerful and fearful and everything else. And they hold on to it for dear life because why? We work in a space where traumatized people lead the way and they haven't done the work, myself included. Like the work I've done over the last 3 years, someone should have pulled my coat 20 years ago when I walked out of prison and said, I see something in you that you need to work on. People waited until everything crashed and burned to the ground and then pulled me aside and said, yeah, I kind of saw that.
Yeah.
That's why the guy who founded Zappos is dead. That's why DMX is dead. Because people in proximity to people who are successful that don't open their mouth and tell the truth about what they're seeing are just as culpable, in my opinion.
Oh my God, that is so powerful. And for the God's honest truth, that is the message that does not reach where it ought to reach. That is the singular message I think that is always missing from these success stories and these stories of people rising. And that is the piece that is always missing, that when people rise, that there are not enough people around them to tell them the truth.
Yes. I keep a kitchen cabinet around me now that tells me the truth, whether I like it or not. And I'm going to hold myself accountable. There were people around me who dumped on me when this was over, who punished me, who did all the things they say they don't believe in. But when I thought about it, I said, wait a minute, they used to do that to other people when I was hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just upset now because they're doing it to me. So this whole thing opened my eyes to see that going forward, if I really want to be the kind of leader that gets it right, I need to keep a small group of people around me that I give the permission to tell me the truth.
Glenn, the things I'm thinking about as you're saying this is, one, the students got to be ready for the teacher to appear, and you and I and Babz, we all have this dear friend in common out of Bridgeport. And we could see that he was getting too big for his britches, admittedly. Now he'll admit it. And I pulled him aside every day, right? But he still had to make his own mistakes. He still had to kind of turn. He still had to understand that this is a character flaw, and that he's got to be conscious of, and and I think he's done the work now, but that was painful.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, he can't ever say he didn't hear it from somebody. That's
true.
The difference. That somebody, it's like if you had a good grandmother or something. You can't act like you didn't hear it. Now you can act like you didn't hear it, but when you do the work that Glenn is talking about, you sit and then you're like, you know what? I did hear that.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing I'll say. Like, most seeds that have been planted in my life that grew into amazing things were planted at a time where I could not hear it, or at least could not hear the message fully. That person that you're talking about, that person is on the phone with me 3 days a week for the last 3 years. Every morning we talk at 8 a.m. And we might only talk for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but this is what we talk about. This person is checking in on, like, how am I doing?
Yeah.
And I saw a change a few years ago in that person, mostly when that person actually stood up for me. And I was a bit surprised by it. I didn't realize this person felt as though they owed me something for standing up for them when they needed it.
Yeah.
And I was just standing up for them the way I stood up for a lot of other people for all sorts of things. But I will say that this person did turn a corner a few years ago. This person has been asking for help. This person still gets it wrong, which I love. I love human beings who get it wrong. Every time a human being gets it wrong around me, it gives me a chance to show them and to show the world what I needed when I got it wrong. Like, I keep myself surrounded with fallible people who own their fallibility and who lean in and ask for grace. Like, grace is the best gift any human can give. It is not transactional. You get nothing in return sometimes. You may not even get the outcome that you're looking for, but that's part of what makes it one of the most amazing gifts that you can give.
Glenn, I came to you about 18 months ago with what I thought was an unsolvable problem. I'd been working on it for a long time. So I came to you with it, and you pointed it right out to me. You're just looking at this thing completely wrong. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And then you said to me, I'll help you, and put away your checkbook. You can't pay me for this. I'll do it for you out of love. And like, wow, like really? Like, because to me, you're like an icon, you know. I had to pull you off of that pedestal myself to be able to say, well, you're like, we're sitting here and I didn't even know I could ask you for help.
Yeah. I appreciate you say every time you say that, you sort of grab me a little bit, because sometimes I don't remember those moments, because I am really moved by loyalty. And you've been super loyal to me. I'm moved by people who tell me the truth, because I feel like I haven't had enough of that around me. And you've been really good at that. And I'm moved by people that have a vision, and a bold vision, and something that other people can't yet see. I remember when I talked about closing Rikers and some of these reentry program people who've been around for 25, 30 years, they'd pull me aside and be like, are you crazy? You shouldn't do this. This is going to ruin your career. They might have been right about the ruin the career part, but they just could not see the vision. There were 11,000 people on Rikers on any given day at the beginning of that campaign, thanks to the work of thousands of people. Now, during the pandemic, there were less than 4,000. Like, that alone is a victory. And now there's all these bills passing about repurposing the land on Rikers. Like, clearly this is going to hit the finish line. It doesn't look exactly how I envisioned it, but again, movements are not real if one person, keeps it alive. And so it is what it is. But like, I like that. I like people that have big visions for themselves, especially big visions that, if they're realized, even if it's some fraction of it, will really help the lives of others. And that's what I saw in that document that you shared with me. And I thought you were vulnerable to share it. And so thanks for reminding me of that. But that's the kind of relationship the three of us have, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
so in thinking about the future, do you think that you will put this on paper and book form? Do you think about that? I mean, do you think about telling the story in a way that people can use it as a syllabus or a movie? Or...
Yeah, let's talk about your book, Glenn.
Is there a book?
I got two things to say. One, books are easy to write. I've been writing one for 15 years.
Me too, I wouldn't say easy, but
trust me, that was all sarcasm. So look, I put a lot to paper, but you know what? Writing the book, what I've written so far, actually was cathartic to me and therapeutic. I didn't realize, I thought I was really writing a book. And what I was doing was saying things out loud, even to myself, that I hadn't said out loud in the past. What it was like growing up with a white father in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn as a child. What was it like for my father to be a police officer? What was it like for my older brother, who I thought of as a father because my father didn't take care of me, to end up becoming a correction officer and then a U.S. Marshal? What are my feelings about my mom and poverty and my younger brother going to prison? All of those things are in the book, as well as my experiences in the nonprofit space. But what I do want to do is to go back and look at the writing and make sure that I didn't use that writing as a way to try to harm other people. Like, I am still angry at a lot of people. Like, I wouldn't be honest if I didn't say that. But I think in some ways I was using the book to sort of get all that out, and I would want to clean it up. But anyway, yes, the short answer is I'm a very auditory learner. I don't read a lot. I listen to books. I listen to movies. So if anything, I'd love for it to go straight to film. If you know anyone, let me know. If you guys are syndicated in Hollywood, like, now's my time. I'm making the pitch. Here it is.
I have Jewish great uncles. Glenn, you should call me.
It'll include stories about John Legend, Desmond Tutu, Richard Gere, President Obama. I got a bunch of stories to tell. Anyway, I appreciate the question. I'd love to tell the story one day. I'm a bit of a talker. So yeah, I'm up for it.
Okay, that's good to know. Because I think there's a story. I think it's a great story.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it ought to be added to the landscape of great stories. So
all right, one book sold. Let's go.
So Glenn, just why don't we pull out for 1 second? Because I talk to people about you all the time, And when I was trying to categorize you in my mind, I don't mean with everything you've done, but I mean in the criminal justice movement, there was a time where people with lived experience, people who had been to prison, were displacing the generation of criminal justice leaders that came before, that were professional managers or social workers or people who had climbed up and had really no experience in having actually gone to prison. In a way, it feels like the pendulum is swinging back, because I don't see the person on a national level who's replaced you as someone who with lived experience. Now, I know that you're hooked up again now with Van, and you're doing some great work there, but Van's never been to prison. So, and not to say he doesn't do fabulous work on behalf of our community, but
I will take issue with that, but okay.
Well, whether or I want to focus on Glenn here. The point is, did we lose that moment? Are we kind of revving up for that moment again? Where are we in terms of people with lived experience, people who've been to prison, actually being at the forefront of this movement?
Thanks for that. I do have to say one thing about Van. When I think of people who had something to lose at the moment when everyone was ostracizing me, he was one of them. Yet he's one of the only people that had a lot to lose that stepped up and said, I'm going to make sure you're okay. And I think he did that because of his own experience at the White House many, many years ago and what that was like for him and so on. So I always want to be loyal to people. And so that's my loyalty to him. And at the same time, I agree with everything else you said. Like, he doesn't personify the movement and the reason, like, he's not the moral voice of the movement. He's an important voice, but he's not the moral voice. So look, I have conversations with a lot of the people who I have worked with in the field almost every day. And there's a small group of us that were really around when there was no movement to speak of, right? It felt like a moment, didn't feel like a movement. And we feel like we poured in and we added something that propelled it forward. And we talk a lot about what you just articulated, that it feels like there's a void that needs to be filled and that someone needs to emerge. And I think part of what has killed that momentum is something that I helped create, the inpouring of a tremendous amount of philanthropy in the space. You know, when you talk about people who haven't had access to resources their whole lives, which is the majority of people who've been to prison, and then you pour a tremendous amount of resources in, but those resources are not directed in the right place, and you don't hold people accountable to doing their own work, and you don't create ways for us to do collective work, then you end up with like a messiness that can just destroy a movement, that can just fester and get worse. And I see elements of that in the movement. I actually see, you know, I'm the person who says people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from resources and power. And yet I would say now that some people closest to the problem are the problem. There are some people who have emerged into leadership that have not checked their privilege at the door themselves, and who have actually mimicked some of the things that we see in white supremacy culture in terms of keeping people away from resources. All of those things have become toxic to the movement. Having said that, like, I still have hope. Like, hope, you know, for me overcomes everything. And so I have hope that one person or a group of people will emerge. I don't think it's going to come from the criminal justice reform movement, actually, because I think we're actually being intellectually dishonest with ourselves if we keep the conversation siloed to criminal justice reform. That's not how we got here. Like, we got here because all of these other systems in the United States have failed people. And then we created this criminal justice system to be a repository of all of those people who failed. Yeah. And so I am wondering and hoping maybe that someone emerges from public health, that someone emerges from some other space out there that recognizes that they have given up on a group of people, and that those people didn't just disappear. They ended up somewhere. They ended up harmed. They ended up oppressed. And emerges as someone who maybe has been involved in the criminal justice system themselves, but has found a tremendous amount of success in this ancillary sort of field, if you will, but recognizes, if you think of a Venn diagram, the sort of overlap, and really rekindles this movement and gives everyone something to look towards. Because there's so much money out there right now that the people who have the money are driving the conversation. Exactly. And that is not how movements are built or sustained. Someone has to drive the movement from a place of morality.
Mm-hmm. You know, I sat down with a funder not that long ago, but probably before I talked to you. And I sat down with the funder and I said, this is what I'm trying to do, right? And it's not that explainable, what I'm trying, you know, what I'm doing. And they said to me, well, this is what we fund, and this is what we want to see. And I'm thinking in the conversation, what do you know about this? Like what? Like what? What do you know about this? I mean, like you have a private elevator going up to your penthouse. What do you know about this? Yeah. And yet they want to dictate to people who are actually in the trenches how we should do our work.
Yeah, you know, that leads me back to your earlier question about how I was able to raise so much money. I was able to raise a lot of money because I wouldn't play that game. You know what I did? I built a brand that was so powerful that they needed to get on the train because it had already left the station. I went from people saying they wouldn't give me money to like damn near begging me to take their money because all the television I was doing, the public speaking, the huge rallies, all of that sort of stuff was a power that I needed to build to get the work done and to get funders to really bend to the will of the organization and do what we wanted to do. I used to tell my staff all the time, we're going to ride this till the wheels fall off. Anyone who works for me, they'll tell you, I have these staff meetings with 20, 30 people there. I'd be like, we're going to ride this till the wheels fall off. They'd be like, what do you mean? I'd be like, we're breaking all the rules. Like we're breaking all the rules. We're doing it the way they don't want us to do it. It's only a matter of time before they scratch the veneer and see what's happening here. So let's see what we can get done in a short amount of time. Let's see what sort of momentum we can build. And so that's how I was able to avoid that reality you just articulated, because that is so true and so real. And the last thing I'd say is, I guess this is the first time I'm going to say this out loud. It's only a matter of time before I get to the point where I launch my own foundation and I'm the one giving money away. And I'm committed to giving money to people who have big visions, big ideas, and then leaving them the hell alone.
I think that sounds like a natural. I honestly thought that you would have already started that, because that seems like a natural order of things. Because I think.
Okay, hold on. I got some debt to pay off.
I know. But if you start a foundation and you need a board member, I will happily come serve.
I love it. Thanks for saying that. Yes, that is where I'm heading. That is exactly where I'm heading. Because I got to tell you, I remember my first $10,000. I was in DC. I had this concept paper, this 13-page concept paper that I made right here on my little balcony up in Harlem. I didn't have any money, walked away from 180 grand a year. I was on social media faking it like I had an organization. All I had was Twitter. And I went to go do a presentation to someone else's board. And I slipped a pitch into the middle of that presentation. And this woman got up at the end and said, I'm dissolving my foundation. I got about 30 grand left. I'm going to give you $10,000. Wow. And that was the beginning of it. But you know what I remember? She didn't want anything else. She was just really impressed with the idea, the vision, the idea of closing Rikers, the idea of investing in other formerly incarcerated people. And that's how I want to show up for people. Like, I just want to do that. Like, here's a check. Some of it is going to fail. Some of it is going to fail because that's how human beings are. I'm going to give somebody 20 grand and they're going to blow it. That's okay, because one person might just create something amazing, and that's worth the risk.
Yeah,
I'm going to apply. Yeah. I'm going to apply for a grant because I've lost more money than I think you could ever give away.
I bet. I tell you one thing: the wealthier I get, the more I think of you, Jeff. And how many times have I picked up the phone and called you and said, "Hey, Jeff, I'm about to get this federal grant. Should I take this money? How should I spend this money?"
Don't do business with the feds.
Let me tell you the end of that story, which is after I called you last year and asked you about that, and you told me about your own personal experience. I did get the EIDL loan. I put it into a separate account. You know, I was really clear with my lawyers about what it can and can't be spent on. Yeah. I got to tell you, Jeff, I haven't spent a penny of it. I'm paralyzed. Like, I literally think I'm going to write them a whole check and give them back the money plus whatever, a little bit of interest they earn, because I am scared to death of just doing. I mean, what you did was just so honest, and at the same time, look where you ended up. I do not want to end up back there.
So here's a little pitch from my program. I'm going to tell you right now.
Let me hear it.
Do not call me if you want to hear yes. You call me to hear no. That's my entire.
That's a good balance, because my tax lawyer leans towards yes on almost everything, and you're the no.
Gas and brakes, man. I'm the brakes.
Well, on that note, friends, this conversation has to come to an end.
Oh man!
But the conversation never ends between us.
That's
and
right.
So, Glenn, you know you always have a home here.
I love it here. Thank you.
Always have a home with, as long as we got a platform, you got a platform.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Glenn, we love you, man. We're so happy that and honored, honestly, that you trust us with this, because we know you don't do that everywhere. So thank you, my brother. Thank you.
I might have to give him a call and talk about, okay, now how do I make that?
Holla at me.
I'm gonna have to holler at you and be like, okay, I'm an old lady now, but I'd like to go into my senior years with a little nest egg. What can you point me in the right direction? What should I do?
Well, you know, whatever knowledge I have, I am here to give it away. Pick up the phone, call me. I love both of you. I always appreciate this opportunity. I hope I'll see you in a few months.
Yes.
And
the
maybe
world opens back up.
That's right. World opens back up. I'm launching the foundation, maybe. Who knows? This has been great. Thank you both.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Community Foundation. Thank you, Lynn Springer. Thank you, Andrew Kaplan. And thank you for the folks who listen to us every day.
Yep. And Babz, love you, Babz. This was
love you too.
Can't
wait to see you, Jeff, in person.
Yeah, soon.
Yes. So, all right, Harry, we're out. Blessings.